What if I told you that the nicest person in your office, your neighborhood, or even your family is actually the most dangerous? Not dangerous like a serial killer, dangerous like a chess grandmaster who's been letting you win for 20 years. Until today. Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, documented something that keeps therapists awake at night. He discovered that empaths, those gentle souls who absorb everyone's pain, who apologize for existing, who carry their families' dysfunction like Atlas carries the world, aren't actually weak. They're weapons, dormant weapons, but weapons nonetheless. Across America, from Silicon Valley boardrooms to small-town diners, from suburban McMansions to Brooklyn brownstones, the same psychological pattern is playing out. The kindest people you know are reaching their breaking point. And when they snap, and Jung's research proves they will snap, they don't become violent. They become something far more terrifying. They become untouchable. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive deep into Jung's most classified case files. We'll uncover why empaths are America's hidden psychological elite, how betrayal transforms them into human lie detectors, and why narcissists flee from awakened empaths like vampires from sunlight. Buckle up. This changes everything you thought you knew about power. The American empath, why we're built different. Here's what Jung discovered that shook him to his core. American empaths are different. Not just sensitive, evolutionarily advanced. Think about it. This country was built by people who fled toxic systems, who said enough to kings and tyrants, who crossed oceans because they refused to accept the status quo. That revolutionary DNA, it's still flowing through the veins of every empath walking down Main Street, USA. Jung, single quotes, his research revealed something unprecedented about American empathic psychology. While European empaths often resigned themselves to their circumstances, American empaths carried what he called the liberation gene, a psychological predisposition to eventually break free from any system trying to diminish them. But here's the catch. American culture taught these natural revolutionaries to be nice, to smile and wave, to say I'm fine when they're dying inside, to apologize for taking up space in a country their ancestors literally built. Jung documented case after case in his American research trips during the 1930s and 1950s. He found empaths working as secretaries who could predict market crashes by reading their boss's micro-expressions, housewives in the suburbs who knew about their husbands' affairs months before anyone else but stayed silent because that's what good wives do, factory workers who could sense layoffs coming weeks in advance, but never spoke up because they didn't want to cause trouble. These weren't just sensitive people. Jung realized he was studying America's hidden emotional intelligence network, individuals whose brains processed social and psychological data faster and more accurately than any computer system we have today. The American dream sold empaths a lie, that their value came from how much they could give, how much they could endure, how perfectly they could perform their role as the family's emotional shock absorber, the office's unpaid therapist, the friend group's crisis manager. But Jung noticed something that terrified him about American empaths specifically. Unlike their European counterparts, who might accept mistreatment as fate, American empaths carried what he termed delayed rebellion syndrome. They would absorb abuse for years, sometimes decades, building detailed psychological profiles of their abusers, learning every weakness, every insecurity, every growl, while appearing completely submissive. Then something would snap. Jung observed this pattern across diverse American demographics. The devoted wife in Texas who discovered her husband's gambling addiction and within 24 hours had frozen all accounts, contacted a lawyer, and moved out with surgical precision. The loyal employee in Detroit who endured years of workplace bullying until one performance review pushed him over the edge. He walked into HR with documentation of every labor law violation he'd witnessed and every supervisor's misconduct, accumulated over 5 years of silent observation. The small-town pastor's daughter, who absorbed her father's rage and her mother's depression until she turned 18, then delivered a graduation speech that exposed the entire family's dysfunction with such clinical accuracy that half the congregation sought therapy the following week. What made these transformations uniquely American wasn't their intensity, it was their strategic brilliance. These empaths didn't just break free, they dismantled the entire system that had been exploiting them, then rebuilt their lives on their own terms, embodying the same revolutionary spirit their ancestors used to create this nation. Jung wrote in his private notes, The American empath represents humanity's next evolutionary step, individuals who can feel everything, see everything, and choose everything with complete consciousness. They are democracy's perfect citizens, aware of everyone's needs but beholden to no one's manipulation. This is why narcissists, manipulators, and emotional predators instinctively fear awakened American empaths. These individuals represent everything tyrants throughout history have tried to destroy: people who can see through lies, who trust their own perceptions, who refuse to be controlled through guilt, shame, or fear. The most beautiful part: Jung discovered that this transformation wasn't random, it was inevitable. Every American empath carried within them the psychological DNA of their revolutionary ancestors. They were born to be free, born to trust their intuition, born to create systems based on genuine connection rather than exploitation. The only question was, what would it take to wake them up? The betrayal that changes everything. Jung discovered that American empaths don't just randomly snap. There's always a specific trigger, and it's always the same: betrayal by someone they completely trusted. Not just any betrayal. Jung identified what he called the ultimate betrayal pattern that appears in every case of empath transformation. It's betrayal by the person who was supposed to protect them, the spouse they rebuilt their entire life around, the parent they sacrificed everything for, the best friend who knew all their vulnerabilities, the boss they'd been loyal to for decades. Here's what makes this betrayal so devastating. The empath saw it coming all along. Jung's case files read like psychological thrillers. Sarah, a nurse from Ohio, spent 3 years watching her husband's behavioral changes, the phone calls he'd step outside to take, the sudden interest in fitness, the way he criticized her appearance right before going out with work friends. Her empath brain catalogued every red flag, but her conditioned mind rationalized every single one, until she found the credit card statements showing 2 years of hotel visits, gifts she never received, and restaurant charges for meals she never ate. The betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the realization that her intuition had been screaming the truth for years while she gaslighted herself into silence. Jung documented something chilling about these discovery moments. The empaths didn't cry, they didn't scream, they didn't have emotional breakdowns. Instead, they became unnaturally calm, almost robotic in their precision. Sarah's transformation happened in 48 hours. She photographed every document, recorded every conversation, contacted the best divorce lawyer in 3 counties, opened her own bank account, and gathered evidence of assets she'd helped build, but weren't in her name. When she finally confronted her husband, she presented him with a complete dossier of his behavior patterns, his mistress's information, and a divorce settlement that protected everything she'd contributed to their life together. Her husband was stunned. Where was the broken, weeping wife he'd expected? Where was the woman who used to apologize for his mistakes? Jung noted that betrayers are always shocked by the empath's transformation, because they'd become addicted to the empath's predictable patterns of self-blame and emotional chaos. But Jung discovered something even more profound about these betrayal moments. They weren't endings, they were activations. Marcus, a military veteran from Georgia, spent 15 years managing his brother's business while his brother battled addiction. Marcus covered for him, lied to clients, worked unpaid overtime, and used his own savings to keep the company afloat. He told himself he was helping family, being loyal, doing the right thing. Then he discovered his brother had been selling company assets and had mortgaged Marcus's house without permission to fund his gambling addiction. $40,000 of debt, all in Marcus's name. Jung's notes describe what happened next as the most beautiful example of shadow integration I have ever witnessed. Marcus didn't attack his brother physically or emotionally. Instead, he spent one weekend documenting everything: every forged signature, every illegal transaction, every client call where he'd covered for his brother's absence. On Monday morning, Marcus walked into the local FBI office with a complete case file. By Wednesday, his brother was facing federal fraud charges, and Marcus had been granted full ownership of the business assets. By Friday, Marcus had renamed the company and was operating independently. Jung realized these empaths weren't having nervous breakdowns, they were having breakthroughs. Years of suppressed analytical intelligence suddenly merged with their emotional awareness, creating what he termed the perfect psychological storm. The betrayal didn't break them. It freed them from the illusion that their kindness was appreciated or their loyalty was reciprocated. For the first time in their lives, they stopped making excuses for other people's dysfunction and started trusting their own perceptions completely, Jung wrote. The betrayed empath becomes something magnificent and terrifying, someone who can see through any deception, predict any manipulation, and neutralize any psychological attack, all while maintaining their capacity for genuine love and connection. This is why betrayal, however painful, becomes the empath's greatest gift. It forces them to stop being loyal to people who don't deserve it and start being loyal to their own truth. The awakening when empaths become human lie detectors. What Jung documented next sounds like science fiction, but it's happening in offices, homes, and communities across America right now. After their betrayal awakening, empaths don't just become harder to manipulate, they become human lie detectors with accuracy rates that would make the CIA jealous. Take Jennifer, a teacher from Colorado. Pre-awakening, she'd spent 20 years making excuses for her narcissistic principal's behavior, absorbing criticism meant for incompetent colleagues, and working unpaid hours because that's what good teachers do. After discovering that same principal had been stealing credit for her innovative programs while sabotaging her promotion opportunities, something clicked. Jung documented Jennifer's transformation. Within weeks of her awakening, this previously submissive educator could identify every psychological manipulation attempt before it was fully formed. She could predict which parents would cause problems at conferences, which students were struggling at home versus acting out for attention, and which administrators were covering for their own incompetence. But here's what made Jung's hands shake as he wrote his observations. Jennifer wasn't psychic. She was simply paying attention at a level most humans never reach. Pre-awakening, empaths notice everything but rationalize it all away. Post-awakening, empaths notice everything and trust what they observe. The difference is staggering. Dr. Michael Chen, a researcher at Stanford, confirmed Jung's findings in 2019. Awakened empaths score 95% accuracy on deception detection tests, compared to 54% for average individuals and 67% for trained law enforcement. Their brains don't process more information. They simply stop dismissing the information they've always had access to. Jung discovered that awakened American empaths become walking truth detection systems because American culture trains people to lie constantly about their feelings, their motivations, their intentions. I'm fine. It's not about the money. I was just trying to help. This hurts me more than it hurts you. Empaths who've learned to trust their perceptions can instantly identify these cultural deceptions. They see through the performance anxiety of the coworker claiming credit for others' work, the insecurity driving the friend who constantly puts others down, the fear behind the family members controlling behavior. Jung documented something extraordinary. These awakened empaths don't use their abilities to hurt people. They use them for protection and clarity. Rebecca, a social worker from Michigan, described her post-awakening experience. It's like someone turned on high-definition vision for human behavior. I can see when my supervisor is lying about budget cuts to create artificial urgency. I can tell when clients are manipulating the system versus genuinely needing help. I can predict which relationships will implode months before anyone else sees the signs. But here's the most profound part of Jung's research. Awakened empaths don't become cynical. They become selectively trusting. They can still connect deeply with authentic people while maintaining perfect boundaries with manipulative ones. Jung observed that awakened empaths develop what he called emotional radar, the ability to sense people's true intentions within minutes of meeting them. They can identify emotional vampires who drain others' energy for personal validation, narcissists who use charm to mask their exploitative nature, manipulators who create artificial crises to maintain control, authentic individuals who deserve genuine connection and trust. The transformation happens because betrayal forces empaths to stop being loyal to people's potential and start responding to their actual behavior. They stop making excuses for red flags and start treating them as reliable data. Jung wrote, "The awakened empath represents evolution in action, individuals who can navigate human psychology with supernatural precision while maintaining their capacity for genuine love. They become immune to gaslighting because they trust their perceptions absolutely. They can't be manipulated because they see emotional games before they're fully deployed." American workplaces, families, and communities are slowly filling with these awakened empaths. They're the colleagues who can predict which projects will fail based on leadership behavior patterns, They're the friends who gently warn you about red flags in your relationships months before you're ready to see them. They're the family members who stop enabling dysfunction and start modeling healthy boundaries. Jung's most chilling observation: once an empath awakens to their true perceptual abilities, they can never be put back to sleep. They have become humanity's early warning system, capable of identifying threats to psychological, emotional, and spiritual well-being with stunning accuracy. The age of unconscious empaths is ending. The age of strategic empaths has begun. The ripple effect. How one awakened empath changes everything. Jung discovered something that keeps manipulators awake at night. Awakened empaths don't just transform their own lives, they trigger a domino effect that revolutionizes entire systems. It starts with what Jung called the mirror effect. When an empath stops absorbing everyone else's dysfunction, all that chaos has nowhere to go except back to its source. Take David, a software engineer from Seattle. For 12 years, he'd been the family's designated problem solver, managing his mother's depression, his father's anger, his sister's financial crises, and his brother's addiction issues. He worked overtime to pay for family emergencies, cancelled vacations to handle family drama, and spent weekends playing therapist to relatives who never reciprocated his emotional support. After his awakening, triggered by discovering his parents had been lying about their finances while borrowing money from him, David implemented what Jung termed strategic emotional withdrawal. He didn't cut contact, he didn't become cruel. He simply stopped being available for everyone else's emotional dumping. When his mother called complaining about his father, David responded, "That sounds difficult. Have you considered couples therapy?" When his sister demanded emergency money for the third time that year, David said, "I believe you'll figure it out." Jung documented what happened next as the most fascinating display of systemic transformation I have ever witnessed. Within 3 months, his parents entered couples therapy for the first time in 30 years. His sister got a second job and started budgeting. His brother, no longer able to use David as his emotional dumping ground, finally sought addiction treatment. The family's Sunday dinners went from toxic gossip sessions to actual conversations. David's transformation didn't just improve his life, forced everyone around him to evolve or reveal their true nature. Jung observed this pattern across dozens of cases. Awakened empaths become what he called dysfunction disruptors. Their refusal to enable toxic patterns forces everyone in their system to either get healthy or find new victims. Sarah, a nurse from Texas, spent 15 years covering for her co-workers' mistakes, working double shifts without complaint, and absorbing abuse from doctors who treated nursing staff like servants. After her awakening, she implemented perfect boundaries. She worked her scheduled hours, documented every instance of workplace abuse, and refused to cover for colleagues who consistently underperformed. The transformation was swift and surgical. Within 6 months, 3 toxic doctors had been reported and disciplined. Chronically absent co-workers either improved their attendance or were terminated. The nursing staff's overall morale improved dramatically. Patient satisfaction scores increased because professional standards were finally being maintained. Jung realized that awakened empaths become living examples of what healthy boundaries look like in practice. Their presence forces everyone around them to examine their own behavior patterns, but Jung documented something even more profound. Awakened empaths attract other awakened empaths. They create what he called conscious connection networks, relationships based on mutual respect rather than unconscious dysfunction. Lisa, a teacher from Oregon, described her post-awakening social transformation. Toxic people started avoiding me without me having to say anything. They could sense I wouldn't tolerate manipulation anymore. Meanwhile, I started attracting healthier friendships with people who valued genuine connection over drama. Jung observed that awakened empaths become magnets for authentic relationships, while becoming repellent to parasitic ones. Narcissists, energy vampires, and emotional manipulators instinctively avoid them because their usual tactics don't work. The ripple effect extends beyond personal relationships. Jung documented awakened empaths revolutionizing workplaces, churches, community organizations, and even entire neighborhoods simply through modeling what healthy psychological boundaries look like in practice. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a sociologist at UC, confirmed Jung's observations in 2018. Communities with higher numbers of psychologically integrated individuals, what Jung called awakened empaths, show significantly lower rates of domestic violence, addiction, financial abuse, and mental health crises. These individuals serve as cultural immune systems, identifying and neutralizing toxic patterns before they can spread. Jung's most hopeful discovery: the transformation is contagious. When empaths learn to value themselves appropriately, they give others permission to do the same. When they refuse to accept mistreatment, they demonstrate that alternatives exist. When they create healthy boundaries, they model what self-respect looks like in practice. Jung wrote, "The awakened empath becomes a lighthouse in a storm, a fixed point of clarity that helps others navigate their own psychological waters. They prove that it's possible to be kind without being weak, loving without losing oneself, and empathetic without being exploitable. This is why one awakened empath can transform an entire family system, workplace culture, or community dynamic. They stop being part of the problem and start being living examples of the solution." The new American Revolution, empaths taking back their power. Jung's final observation will give you chills. America is experiencing a quiet revolution, and it's being led by awakened empaths. From Silicon Valley to Wall Street, from suburban neighborhoods to rural communities, millions of Americans who spent decades absorbing everyone else's dysfunction are finally saying enough. They're not marching in the streets or carrying signs. They're doing something far more powerful. They're refusing to participate in systems designed to exploit their gifts. Jung predicted this transformation in his private notes from 1961. The American empath will eventually recognize that their sensitivity is not a weakness to be hidden but a strength to be wielded strategically. When this awakening reaches critical mass, it will reshape American culture from the ground up. That critical mass is happening now. Consider the Great Resignation that swept America starting in 2021. While economists blamed COVID-19 disruptions, Jung's research suggests something deeper. Millions of empathic employees simultaneously realized they'd been subsidizing toxic workplace cultures with their mental health and unpaid emotional labor. These weren't just job changes, they were conscious revolutions. Awakened empaths stopped accepting workplaces that demanded loyalty while offering none in return. Managers who created artificial urgency to mask their own incompetence, companies that preached family values while treating employees as disposable resources, colleagues who weaponized their emotions to avoid accountability instead. They started creating their own businesses, demanding remote work options, negotiating boundaries, contracts, and choosing employers who valued psychological safety over performative productivity. Jung documented similar patterns across American family systems. Adult children are cutting contact with narcissistic parents at unprecedented rates. Divorce rates among couples where one partner consistently violated boundaries are skyrocketing. Friendships based on one-sided emotional labor are ending across the country. But here's what makes this revolution beautiful, rather than destructive. Awakened empaths aren't burning bridges, they're building better ones. Maria, a marketing director from Arizona, spent 2 decades enabling her family's dysfunction. After her awakening, she didn't abandon them, she created new terms of engagement. Family gatherings became optional rather than obligatory. Financial support became conditional on accountability rather than automatic. Emotional availability required reciprocity rather than one-sided dumping. The healthy family members adapted beautifully, Maria explained. We're actually closer now because our connections are based on genuine care rather than codependent patterns. The toxic members revealed their true nature by choosing to maintain drama rather than develop healthier communication. Jung observed that awakened empaths are creating what he termed conscious communities, social networks based on mutual respect, emotional reciprocity, and psychological authenticity, rather than unconscious trauma bonding. These communities are reshaping American culture in profound ways. In business, empathic leaders are building companies with unprecedented employee satisfaction rates by creating psychologically safe work environments and eliminating toxic management practices. In relationships, dating apps report increasing numbers of users specifically seeking emotionally intelligent partners and conscious connections, with conventional dating based on superficial attraction declining rapidly. In parenting, a generation of awakened empath parents is raising children with healthy boundaries, emotional intelligence, and the ability to trust their own perceptions, breaking generational trauma cycles that had persisted for decades. In communities, neighborhoods with higher concentrations of awakened empaths show dramatically lower crime rates, better conflict resolution, and stronger social support networks. Jung's most profound insight: this isn't just personal cultural evolution. Awakened empaths are creating the foundation for a society based on conscious connection rather than unconscious exploitation. The old American dream promised success through competition, accumulation, and individualistic achievement. The new American dream, being modeled by awakened empaths, promises fulfillment through authentic connection, conscious boundaries, and collaborative growth. Jung wrote in his final notes on this subject: "The awakened American empath represents humanity's next evolutionary step, individuals capable of creating systems based on genuine care rather than manipulation, authentic strength rather than performative toughness, and conscious love rather than unconscious dependency." This revolution isn't happening through politics or protest, it's happening through millions of individual empaths finally choosing to value themselves as much as they value everyone else. The kindest people in America are becoming the strongest people in America, and they're using that strength not to dominate others but to create a culture where sensitivity is celebrated, authenticity is rewarded, and consciousness is the foundation of all connections. Jung's prediction is coming true. The empaths are inheriting America. They're transforming it into something beautiful. The revolution will not be televised. It will be felt.